Hi guys, it's Tammy with Cheers to Creativity, and it's Tuesday, and I'm going to do a Tuesday tips, techniques, and teachings. My plan was to show you some of my favorite brushes and a couple other favorites, but I also told myself that if I ended up with a bunch of paint on my plate after my projects, I would show you a very fun and quick palette knife heart. This very similar to this guy. But I also did the palette knife on the heart cutout that I did for this tag. Tag doesn't have its tag part yet. So I'm going to show you that and just talk a tiny bit about palette knives. They come in a lot of different sizes, and the reason for that is you need a smaller one if you're going to be dealing with small, tiny things, like my angel tags I've been doing. I've been using a real small palette knife. But you can always just utilize the inexpensive plastic ones that you can find at the dollar store, at Michael's. And really even a set of good palette knives is not that expensive. I want to say the set of 5 I bought on Amazon was about $7. So really pretty inexpensive. And it's something that takes some getting used to doing. It's very freeing. It's very free flow. And as long as you're okay with not having exact perfect lines, it's really kind of a lot of fun. As I said, I've been working on a lot of the palette angels. I've shown some of them, but it's kind of fun whether I'm doing the background or just the angel. And coming up later this month in our membership group, we're actually doing the January angel, which I did on a skinny little canvas here, but could be done very largely too. But look at the fun texture you get with the palette knife. Anyhow, if you pop on, let me know, even if it's on a replay. I love to come back and check for any messages or anything like that. And if we had to name today, it would be the Hot Mess Express. It's just been absolutely nothing bad, but it's just been a hot mess. I've taken a photography class. I took a class that I was really looking forward to by one of my very, very favorite people in the whole wide world. And I usually just adore her classes, but this one was not meant to be for me today. Even after I got it done the first time, I went back and tried to work on it. It's just kind of a hot mess. So I may be going back and reworking those flowers with a palette knife when I'm done with you guys today. So I'm going to put you down and talk a little bit more about different ways to do the palette knife. I think we'll go down first. Ready? Here we go. Okay. So when I show you this, we're not going to have any pattern at all. We're going to create the pattern as we use the palette knife. Sorry, I'm going to bring you down just a little further, I think. Let's see how that is. Sorry, guys. When I was going to talk to you about my favorite things, I didn't need to have the camera set up like this. Okay. Move these guys out of the way. Move this just a tiny bit closer to you. So on something like this, I'm actually going to use the palette knife itself to, for lack of better words, draw my pattern on. And I'm going to use 2 techniques. I'm going to use some of it to fill in the bigger parts with color, kind of like frosting a cake. And then I'm also going to come back and add more colors with it, and then use more of a scraping motion that kind of helps give it that texture. This doesn't have a ton of texture. I did do this morning just with some craft paint, like the Decor Art paints that I use often. You can always add a texture medium to regular acrylic paints, and that'll make them thicker and a little easier to create the texture, but you don't have to. It just might mean a few more extra layers. And the nice thing I like about palette knife too is if you do something you don't care for, you can always, to show you some of my favorite brushes and... Oops. Sorry, guys. scrape it off. That's what I was trying to say. And of course, working on paper is different than working on wood, and it's different than working on canvas. But it was, at least this way, you'll get a feel for the knife itself. Okay, so I'm going to give you a for instance here with the little angels I do. I don't necessarily put a pattern on, but I do sometimes go in with a little brush and maybe just a little flesh and just paint on her face first. I do come back and add paint with my palette knife and just give her a little texture, but I like to let that first layer dry on her face just because she's so small. And I also will at times come back with just a brush to add some detail. So I'm going to show you the first simple thing first. Simple. So I knew I was going to, I love this saying, be messy and complicated and afraid. Show up anyways. I think it's really perfect for the world we live in, that there's an awful lot of times that we're messy. You should see my studio. It's a flippin' messy mess. There's times this all seems very complicated, and I think there's been times that we can say we've been afraid during this last 9 months, has it been? Well, probably longer than that. But if we just choose to show up anyway, we're all better off. So all I wanted to do was to kind of give an element to this tag about being messy. So I already had just a simple wood cutout. And it was already base coated. I do a lot of heart art this time of year where I'm using the hearts to layer on with music and other things. Moving the right way. Okay, I'm trying to make sure. There we go. Okay. So all I did with this guy was I picked up some colors, and I'm going to use what I have on my plate, but I might come back and pick up a little gold too, because I liked the gold in here. And again, here's my very, very messy palette from earlier today. So when I paint with a palette knife, I'm actually painting using the bottom of the knife. We'll get you better this way. Let me see. Moving my plate. Did it get better or worse? It got worse. Okay, I go this way. And this whole reverse angle thing is so hard for me. Okay, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of paint on the bottom of my palette knife. And I'm just going to randomly set it down, and then thinking kind of like frosting, I'm just scraping it with the back edge of the knife. I might go off a little bit on the side. And I'm going to pick up another color. This happens to be orange. And I put a couple dots on. And I'm just going to scrape it. Or I can use just the edge of it and scrape this way. This is not a pretty technique for this particular heart. It's just, like I said, wanting to make it a little messy. And then I wanted to give it a little bit of a shimmer. So I don't have this on my plate, but I'm going to add it to it, which is a metallic gold. Do a little bit on my edge. Scraping in different directions. Picking up when I want a little more. Now this might be just a wee bit too messy for some people, and that's okay. Not everybody has to like everything I do or everything anybody does for that matter. But it's just about playing and just being able to relaxing is kind of have fun. I love the sound of the scraping, but that's just me. I'm actually coming back with a little bit of red. It's not the red I used on the base coat, but we'll just give it another dimension. And it's messy, but once it dries, I can either use the heart as an embellishment or it could be used alone. Might be a great surface to just put a saying. Let's see what we can see on here. Okay. Oh, thanks guys for letting me know you're on. So here we go. That's, like I said, what I did to do just the heart on here. So it's a real fun way to just practice your palette knife because you're trying to do something messy. Okay, so other applications for that, oh my gosh, they're endless. But I mean, it's a great way to do a background. So you have some texture and some color, but you're not just using a brush or just using a sponge. Okay, so I'm going to take just a second. I'm going to show you an example of using, excuse me, a method where I would actually kind of draw, for lack of better words, draw on or use a brush to start my painting. Let's see if I have a bigger brush for this. Okay, so I'm just going to grab a little brown paint. And I'm going to just lay in where I want a branch to be. Let me think. Over this way. So I'm just drawing in this branch. I'm trying to make it pretty simple. You'll see why in a second. Okay. And I'm not going to worry too much about making it super base coated in because I'm going to come back with my palette knife and add more paint. So that's my going down. On top of it or below it, I'm going to hang a heart. And so this time I'm actually just going to take a brush and I'm going to draw out the basic shape of my heart. And I can fill it in a little bit first if I'd like. Again, like I said, I'm going to come back in and use the palette knife on it. But this is one way that you can just know where you're going with it. Okay. So, here's my branch and here's my heart. Very simple. So I'm going to come back in, again, using the back of my palette knife, and I'm picking up the paint on the back of my knife. And I'm just going to start laying it down. And it's okay that it's different consistency. Ooh, I've got a hair that's not where it needs to be. Sorry, guys. Here, still got paint on there. And first, I'm just layering on my first layer of paint. I'm just using the very tip. And this is kind of small. I probably normally would use a smaller brush. But just to show you today, I'm going to wipe that off, and I'm going to do the same thing with the brown. I've picked up the brown on the back of my knife. I'm just going to lay it in here. So I have thicker paint to work with. Ran out of paint. Seems hard to believe today that I would run out of paint. But I'm just laying. This is where it's kind of more like the frosting aspect, because I'm just trying to spread it so it's covering my, we'll call it the pattern that I created. But I'm not super worried if it just doesn't cover it exactly. I can pull it with the tip of the brush. I can push it a little bit. If I wanted to make lines that were skinnier, I would just use the edge of the brush. Knife, sorry. Okay. I'm going to pick up a lighter color. In this case for me right now, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this yellow, bottom of the brush, and I'm going to lay it down here and there on my branch so that I can blend those colors by scraping it, because my brown is still wet. When I pull that yellow in this case, it just gives me another color. I can even pick up a little bit of white. not the best colors in the world for doing a tree. I'm picking up a little green. But it certainly gives me some variation in color. And then by scraping it, I create some of that texture. Okay, so I put the red on that heart and my thumb in the orange. And I'm going to just come back, and again, this is very small. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of color on the tip of that, and I'm going to blend that in and kind of scrape it as I go. I might pick up a little pink that's on here. I'm going to pick up a little gold. Because I'm working on such a small area, I'm just using the tip. Hello from Nebraska. Okay, so you could start this project on an already base coated surface. This one obviously was not. But you can also come back and just create your surface with colors working around it. So I'm going to be a little bold. I'm going to pick up some purple. I'm going to lay this color down. And this is where I said it's like frosting a cake. I'm just kind of spreading my color out, going as close to my elements as I want to. Going in all sorts of directions. And then when I would get to areas like around my heart, I would be using it more like frosting here, and then get close to the shape that I'm trying to work around. This is spreading it out quite a bit. I'm going to try to go into just the very tip of my palette knife and work around my heart. I can always come back and clean it up. That's probably the one thing I will say I do a lot with palette knife painting is I go back and forth. That way it gives my paint a little time to dry if I need to add a color, so I'm not just creating a muddy mess. But if I do, that's okay too. All right, so I would go through and get all of this pretty much outlined in this color. Except for I'm running out of paint. It's okay. So I'm just going to pick up a different color here. This is a little bit of a red. I'm going right over what's underneath because I'm going to mix my background up. This is where I think it's fun to do a background, and you just get kind of a little crazy and lay down your colors and see where they go and see what happens, and picking up a little gold. Then you would continue on until you had your background the way you wanted it, and that gives you a chance to come back and add any details you might want to, or maybe add a little more color to your heart. And if you have tiny details that you want to add, like maybe a little bit of, on this guy, maybe the heart is hanging from the branch from a string, you can always go back and utilize a liner brush. It'd be good to have black paint right now, but I don't. And you can just work with whatever texture's there and then just go ahead and use your liner. So that would be how you would work on your palette knife if you were starting with nothing there, or having a pattern there to work with. What I'm going to show you is actually going to be a little different, that we're not going to have a pattern first. We're going to create the heart and the background. And I could do the whole background first. I didn't, so I'm going to show you how I did this guy, okay? I'm going to make sure I have enough colors to do this before I start. It's funny, I didn't expect I'd be running out of paint since I had so much of it. But hey, that's why it's nice to have paint nearby. So I'm just going to grab a couple extra colors. We're going to start off by doing the heart. If you want to, you could always sketch out a heart. I did not. I just started off with some red and my palette knife. Switch pads for you here. Whoop. This the right way? This is the right way. Okay. So I'm just doing this in a multimedia pad. You can do this on canvas, you can do this on wood, you can do this on just about anything. All right, so the whole purpose here is just to have a heart with some texture and a fun, messy background. So I'm setting my example, my palette knife. I just wipe mine off with a paper towel or the towel that's on my lap in between colors. You can wash them. Obviously, you can tell by the look of this one, it's been well loved for a long period of time. Okay. So I have a little red here. I'm going to make a red heart. Hearts can be any color. And I'm just going to kind of sketch out the shape of a heart. It makes a little pink in here too. All right, so it's not perfect, but I have an idea of what I want to fill in. So now I can pick up the paint on the back of my palette knife. This is going to be more pink than the red was. And I'm going to lay it down, and then I'm like, this is a little bit more like the frosting. I'm just going to try to spread it out to cover the surface of my element, the heart. I will be coming back and adding more color to this, so I don't need it to be perfectly one color, and I don't need it to be necessarily completely covered. I just want my good part of my shape to be showing up in here. And depending on how thickly you apply your frosting paint, you could, this is fairly thick, I could come back and just scrape to create some lines. And I'm going to start creating a background. This one was done with some greens, and it looks like a little bit of the heart color and some gold. Again, really what you have can work if you're working with a color scheme. This is a color I didn't even use, I don't think, on my last project. Be one of very few. But it's just a green, and here's a green-blue color. Sure there is. And this is a green-blue color that if it came out would be pretty cool. And I'm still going to have leftover paint. Okay, so I'm going to pick it up at the bottom of my brush, or not my brush, my knife. And I'm going to lay it next to the heart, and I'm just going to, yes, I did manage to pick up some other colors, didn't I? But that's okay for this. I'm just trying to give myself some background. I picked up a little of that darker blue-green going next to my heart. Now remember, your heart's going to be very wet still, so you don't want to get too close to it. I'm going to go with a little more of this blue-green. So when I lay it down, I'm laying it next to it, but not on it. Mix the colors here. I'll pick up a little orange for my background. Why not? And I can use more of the tip of it to get closer in. And then spreading it out, I'm really using the whole bottom of the knife. Next to and spreading it out. I'm not sure these are the best colors to use, but hey, they're on my palette. We're going to use them up just to show you the fun you can have with a palette knife. I'm going to pick up a little white paint just to lighten my background up a little bit. It's a little dark for my liking. There's nothing wrong with it, just like to lighten it up, so I'm just picking up white and gonna put it down in a couple spots, and then I'm just gonna scrape different directions and just really gives it a fun background. Okay. Oops, I got some red in there. That's okay. All right. I'm going to pick up a little bit of gold. So I have this gold in my background. And again, I'm not going to do it everywhere. And I'm going to make sure I'm spreading it in different directions. I don't want to be going all in one way. This is much more abstract than you normally see, especially from me. But it's, like I said, it's very freeing. I mean, it's very hard to create the exact same thing twice. That is one reason why I will say that most of my palette stuff is done as one of a kind, just because I'm not that adept at doing it the same way twice. Okay, so I've got enough background for my liking. I want to outline my heart, so I'm going to do that. I wiped off my palette knife, and I'm just going to pick up black, more on a little bit on the edge, and I'm just going to kind of go around, laying it down kind of gently. It's still pretty thick. And I pull from each direction, working more with the tip again, just kind of not necessary to do this way. The more I press down flat on it, the thicker the line is going to be. Here's the good part. So this might be a little thicker than I wanted, so I'm just going to wipe my palette knife off, and I'm just going to scrape it. Either scrape it completely away, blend it into my background, or no, I can come back with a background color and go right over it. And that may not have been too thick, but just wanted to show you guys as an example. So I've kind of outlined my heart. I'm going to come down here and give him a little bit of a curly Q too, I think. Couple things here. I could take that color and pull it in to kind of shade my heart, or pull it away to shade it away from everything. Either way, let's just try this way. We're going to just shade on this side. I'm just going to pull this just a little bit around. All right, now I'm going to come back and put a couple colors inside of my heart. So what do I have? I've got a little orange here. So I'm just going to lay some orange down here. I don't have a lot of it, but enough to get a little different color going on. And I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of purple. Very tiny bit of purple. If I push down flat, it's more like frosting. If I stay on the tip, it's more like dragging it and giving it some lines. Oh, I'm even going to pick up a little bit of that blue-green that we had, and I'm going to create a littler heart inside here. Again, not a perfect shape. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the gold that I had left and streak a little gold in there. Maybe just up on the top part of my heart. And even a little bit of white. So I hope what you can get out of this is when you're pushing down flat, you're going to get more of a, use it more like frosting. So if I've got it like this, I'm going to lay it down here. If I push down, it's more like using frosting, or if I use the tip, I can draw with it, or I can create more distinct lines. You'll find your pressure for what works best for you and creating what you like. It's really nothing like painting with a brush. I've painted for over 30 years, and I've painted with palette knife on and off, but a lot more recently. And I think part of it for me in the freeing aspect is that it's just so different than trying to make a perfect brush stroke or making it be perfect. All right, so I just did this to show you guys on a multimedia pad. Like I said, you can do this on canvas. Hello. You can do this on wood. Just if you decide you really like the idea of the palette painting, I do recommend a good set of palette knives. I'm pretty sure you can find them at Michael's as well. But if you have any specific questions about palette knife painting, we do it occasionally, not a ton. Like I said, I've started doing a little more intense projects like the Angel palette, or January Angel, in our membership, Already an Angel. And if you have any questions about that, you can always ask too. So hopefully you guys are having a terrific Tuesday. And until I see you again, please be safe, be kind. Cheers. Bye.